He waits in patience to prevail, to recover the creature, and slay the enmity by suffering all the rage and envy and evil entreatings that the evil spirit that rules in the creature can cast upon him. And he receives it all with meekness and pity to the creature, returning love for hatred, wrestling with God against the enmity with prayers and tears night and day, with fasting, mourning, and lamentation, in patience, in faithfulness, in truth, in love unfeigned, in long suffering, and in all the fruits of the Spirit, that if by any means he may overcome evil with good, and by this his light in the sight of the creature, that the eye may come to be opened, which the God of this world hath blinded, that so the creature might see what it is he thus hates, and what fruits he himself brings forth, that the creature may be convinced he is no deceiver, but hath with him the life and power of innocency and holiness, in whom he rules. And this preaching hath a power in it to open the eye of all that are not wilfully blind, because they love the deeds of darkness, and such are left thereby without excuse forever. And thus he in his members many times wrestles and preaches to the spirits in prison with much long suffering towards the world, a nation, or a particular person, before he gives them up and numbers them for destruction, yea, sometimes till their rage against him and cruelty exercised upon his members be so great that there be no remedy, as in the days of old. 2 Chronicles 36:15-16. I think you can see in this passage the solidarity that the early friends had with those who had been overcome by what they thought was a good solution for their discomfort in life. That a resorting to deceit as a way to gain power. And how that destroys the soul. And how the early friends felt not only obligated, but deeply sorrowful that a human being would be in that position, because it's a sense of death in life when a person decides to go that route. They put their faith in darkness and deceit. And thereby cut themselves off from the exhilarating light and joy that is his birthright. As a human being. And yet, it's a very common thing. The whole world lies in wickedness, the scriptures say. But we don't have to do that. We don't have to be numbered among those who live their lives in darkness and deceit. We can overcome the world through Christ, the light. Even when all one's orientation throughout the majority of one's life has been acquiring power through deceit, even to the point of deceiving the self. It's a horrible fate. And it's understandable why they would have tried to inform those who had not yet known Christ that the way out of darkness is available, even when the life has been given over to it.
This is very close at hand for me. Um, I started my day writing an email to my son, whom I haven't tried to communicate with since fourth month, um, when he um, dismissed me with an abusive word, which I'm not going to repeat, and basically cut himself off from his immediate family. But of course, his mother and his sister, who both live in New York, have had some limited contact with him since then. But because he just got an eviction notice last week, I actually 5 days ago, I I wrote to him while I had free time and a clear mind, saying that he's gotten himself into a very uncomfortable and dangerous corner, and he needs a miracle, um, to keep him from getting into a position where he's living on the street, unable to work at his job or earn money. I said I thought his condition was the condition of a soul in hell, where every soul hates every other soul and wishes only to injure or destroy them. And I suggested that he call on Jesus Christ and ask for forgiveness of his sins, or just whatever he has to say. Help, Lord. And that I remain ready to help and encourage him. I shared that with a friend who isn't in this group, who has schizophrenics in her family, who said that it might move him, but if he's in his schizophrenic madness, he probably won't be able to hear me. So I'm in a kind of distracted state today. I've done my best to try to appeal to him, and I don't know if I will hear back from him. I don't know what the next news I will get about him or from his mother or his sister. Tom was with me and another friend the other night as I was taking them out to a restaurant coming back from Ohio yearly meeting. And I broke into tears over my son and then pulled myself together and said, I'll be okay. I'm compartmentalizing this grief. And I've been doing that, just saying, okay, I'm not going to think about it for now. But it's haunting me when I let it come back. And as you see, my life is in a somewhat chaotic state because I thought I had canceled this meeting or put it off till next week or some other time, and I hadn't. But yes, I'm at the same time that whenever I look at the news that's pushed at me by Microsoft, or whoever provides the news, I'm seeing new evidence of madness in the seat of political power in Washington and great cruelty, with people getting rounded up and imprisoned just because their skin is dark, and picked off the streets or out of shopping centers or wherever. And I think we don't have the protections of the Constitution anymore. We have a government that's behaving like a dictatorship, with a crazy dictator. Forgive me for expressing a political opinion. And at the same time, my own family is in this situation. It's very distressing. But this is to say that the Lord remains my shepherd, remains our shepherd, and remains trustworthy. But I'm hearing the waves of the ocean of darkness break on the rocks very close to me. And so Nayler's words are speaking to my condition. I can only pray for other people, my son and the people that run things in this country.
What I was struck with was just the relentlessness of the Lamb. And it reminded me, I was thinking of a parent whose child has gone astray. And, you know, I had that happen in my family, and my mother she was not judging him. She was, what are the words? She was coming to God with prayers and tears night and day, fasting, mourning, lamentation, but patience, faithful, in truth, in love, in long suffering. I mean, that tension between this is so bad and there is so much hope, and how, it's hard for us to hold both of those things. Obviously, the Lamb can, and but even he can't make us do what's right. He pulls, he entices, he delights, he reproves, and he's got a lot more tools than we do. But still, I think he faces kind of the same heart, has the same heart we do.
Yeah, I struggled to hang on through such a long passage without punctuation, but so wasn't certain. I need to read it a few more times, but I was so impressed with. I was thinking of the Hound of Heaven, just pursuing, just so uh, committed, so relentless, so and 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 the love that is the motivation behind that pursuing. Um, uh, what a mystery that kind of love is to the bulk of humanity that um, is unacquainted with that which is pursuing them. Um, I was also thinking of that last bit, if you know what I'm talking about, in the screw tape letters, where what is it, screw tape and wormwood are saying, if our, if our we're working feverishly to try to understand this love. If we could just get to the bottom of where this love is coming from, then the whole deck of cards will come crashing down. We're just struggling to figure out this love, you know, exactly. What a mystery that kind of love could, that degree of love could be pursuing us. What for me was missing, if anything, and what I was reading here is one could read this passage and think, well, it just, if this Hound of Heaven succeeds, then it's, it's just a night and day. You're won over and you're claimed for life. But I mean, isn't this sort of uh, uh, Lamb's War is going on continually? It's not just a victory won and then we're home free. So I guess I kind of, I'd be helped if this passage had addressed just the fact of us needing this Lamb's War is a continuous thing that we can't let our guard down. It's playing out throughout our lifetime. Just random thoughts there.
That was helpful to me, Tom. Yeah. And we're working on multiple, or we're witnessing multiple battlefields, but it's the same war.
I'd like to read that passage from 2 Chronicles 36, 15, and 16. And this is the NRSV. The Lord, the God of their ancestors, sent persistently to them by his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they kept mocking the messengers of God, despising his words and scoffing at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord against his people became so great that there was no remedy.
This puts me in mind of the passages in the late passages in the book of Jeremiah, where he describes being put up to his armpits in muck underneath the main chambers of the palace and having to be pulled out by a rope and delivering a scroll, having a friend or agent deliver a scroll to the king who burned it in the fireplace. I mean, the Lord, through his prophet Jeremiah, was really rising up early and trying to report the truth of the situation. And Jeremiah was being almost killed for telling the truth. And of course, being mocked by the official court prophets, Shemaiah and others.
I think that that passage that you read, Madeline, from Second Chronicles, is typical of a people that hasn't known Christ and is relying upon their own machinations, such as deflection or seeing themselves as victims. Anything that will stop the truth from reaching their hearts. When the Lord in his love wants that truth to reach the heart, humankind is too afraid to trust in it. And it will result in difficulties. Always. But they are insignificant compared to what is given to us to overcome those difficulties. And once they were overcome, to have a kind of freedom. So it may seem as though the word of the prophet is hateful because it would tear down those false idols that human beings put their faith in to preserve themselves from destruction, humiliation. But it's not the way. And the prophet has to sound the truth. Even to the ears that won't hear.
The next section talks about the best outcome when the lamb has been heard. And I'm wondering if people feel like they could go ahead and that we could go ahead and move into that.
Is this the section beginning after the citation of Second Chronicles? And these fruits are his colors he holds forth to all the world in such as he reigns in?
Yes.
I would read that.
Okay. Thanks.
I'll read that title again, or that colophon. And these fruits are his colors he holds forth to all the world in such as he reigns in. As they come to obey him, he covers them with love, gentleness, faith, patience, and purity, grace and virtue, temperance and self-denial, meekness and innocency, all in white that follow him, in whom he is, who walks themselves as he walked, in all things conforming to God, with boldness and zeal, owning the Lamb to be their leader, with him testifying against the world that the deeds thereof are evil. Themselves, the meanwhile, covered with his righteousness against all the storms and tempests that they must be sure to meet withal, who bears that testimony which the Lamb hath ever borne, in whom he appeared to the convincing of the world, that he is the same that ever he was from the beginning, that all that will believe and loves holiness may see where it is to be found, and come forth to him and be saved, that the whole world become not as Sodom in the day of wrath, which ever comes upon a people or a nation after Christ hath thus appeared and been rejected thereof.
Just to be clear for myself, most of the latter half of that is speaking sort of like the sending out of the 70. It's like once you get it, now you're responsible for spreading it. Am I understanding that?
I am seeing it as this is the natural outcome of the Lamb's appearing and showing himself to be the kind of general of the armies, or what kind of person he is. He his followers, those who obey him, come forth all in white, the color of innocency, and they model an obedient life, plain and simple. And they're covered with his righteousness. They walk with boldness and zeal, owning the Lamb to be their leader, and with him testifying against the world. I I could sometimes wish that the Religious Society of Friends as a whole would more walk in that kind of innocency and uphold the value of obedience. It's not in the word spices, but it's what it's all about. If we are obedient to the Lamb, he will give us the other qualities, the simplicity, peace, and whatever else, that are the fruits of our obedience.
Madeline,
And
can you say where you were, what words you were thinking of when you asked your question?
Um,
What prompted your question?
that, so there, those who have been convinced, we might say, and are covered with righteousness, then are going to come up against storms and tempests as they bear that testimony which the Lamb hath ever borne. And so it felt a little bit like that was a maybe not a mandate, but I also see what you're saying, John, that it doesn't have to be a street corner preaching of any sort, but more like just a living in the light and a living in the what we've been taught to listen and obey. I think that's what you were saying.
yes, and we may be sort of smiling, people may smile tolerantly at us, as almost all my kinfolk do. Oh yeah, Johnny, he's religious. He's got this thing about Jesus Christ. And when I say that I believe that we're being lied to by the medical establishment and big pharma, then I look like an right-wing anti-vaxxer fanatic. I never thought I would be looked on as a right-winger, but that's the category that I fit into, as a distruster of much of the status quo. And of course, oh yeah, the Quakers, they don't believe in war, do they? Okay, well, they're harmless, and we can have our war machine in spite of the fact that we have 400 conservative Quakers in Ohio and 400 in Iowa and some in North Carolina. Big deal. They're not going to stop our war machine. So we're smiled at tolerantly because we don't stop the machine, or we're if we demonstrate in the street against the outrage in Gaza, we're smeared as anti-Semites, and maybe arrested and then released on our own recognizance. But we're not stopping the war machine either. The military supplies keep getting shipped to Israel.
I think that this paragraph clearly distinguishes between those who will believe and love holiness and those who reject it. So for the Friends, it was a very clear-cut choice. And I think that those who don't know Christ, who don't know that alternative way of being, there can be a great deal of confusion, and some of it intentional. Identifying ideals or ethics or political correctness as sufficient to justify us. But the early friends were saying none of those things is sufficient. That there needs to be this orientation in the human being towards truth, that is Christ. And that will preserve us as human beings. But without that, we, as Nayler says, will be as the whole world. And like Sodom in the day of wrath. Whichever comes upon a people or a nation after Christ has thus appeared and been rejected thereof. So it's very clear cut for the early friends. It's either Christ or it's humanity's destruction, as it was in Sodom. And that's not just a national figure, it's true for every soul. It's too easy to wander away from that choice, making that choice to distract ourselves. But this is the most important decision that we can make in our lives. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be given.
A curious irony is, as I read these words, is I'm thinking of early Quaker history, and I'm thinking of teenage girls stripped naked to the waist and being flogged through the streets of Cambridge for being Quaker witnesses. James Nayler having his tongue pierced and his forehead branded for riding into Bristol on a donkey. The Boston martyrs being hanged on Boston Common for simply being Quakers and defying the order of banishment. That was then, and now we are mostly tolerated and just marginalized. But meanwhile, our era has seen the destruction of Sodom because we've seen the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We've seen the destruction of the World Trade Center with 3,000 people in it. And we've seen the United States devastate Iraq.
These are great catastrophes, but they somehow disorient us by their magnitude. Whereas this life in Christ is something that occurs in you, or possibly in you. It occurs in me. So let's keep it at a human level rather than a historical one that somehow distorts the issue from the personal to the grand and extraordinary. It remains for each of us in our hearts to make this commitment to truth, to knowing the self, because it is only in self-reflection and honesty, honest self-scrutiny, that we open ourselves to receive the light of Christ. It happens on an individual, personal level. And it's available to everyone, no matter what his state.
Yeah, I think it's the personal level that resonates with me. The most directly, and when my head hits the pillow at night, I can think on the personal level, despite all the challenges in the world. This choice, Patricia, that was so clear to early friends, and commitment to truth. Am I right in inserting a bit of me into what the text that we read, that this choice, this commitment is something we need to return to continually? That's not really clear to me in the text, but I gather it's something that I need to commit to renewedly.
Yes, I think so, Tom. In the early friends in Christ too spoke about walking in the light. Walk in the light while you have the light, for night cometh when no one can walk. So there is that realization that we're going to be assaulted by darkness, and we need to recognize what the light is and be devoted to it, which for the early friends wasn't a problem, that devotion to it, because they had faith in truth. When there was deceit or disorientation or confusion, those things were uncomfortable. They didn't paper over them. They looked at them and they suffered because of them, because of the confusion, because of the anger. These things they knew weren't right, weren't the state that they should be in, and they suffered as a result of being in those states. They suffered so much. that God's mercy revealed to them the truth with a capital T that they had been longing for, that they knew was necessary to base their lives on, the foundation for their lives. And because they had suffered so much without the truth, and then had been given the truth, and no longer had that painful suffering, it was so overwhelmingly convincing that this is what humanity is meant for, that they all set aside whatever else they were doing and went out and spoke to other people about this glorious, unexpected, who knew, thing that is meant for us humans. And because it's so conflicted with the status quo, the way people had arranged their lives, and the deceit that they accepted in themselves and in others, they were persecuted for it, attacked, their lives taken in some situations. They were humiliated. But as Nayler says here, Christ is the same in every age. And humanity, human sin is the same in every age too. These two forces are in opposition. And we each personally have to decide, which side are we on? And God can see what your decision is, and will have mercy if your heart is right and you're willing to suffer for the truth. And that's what makes a people of God. Sons and daughters to receive the truth.
And carry it forth in love. I think I need to stop. I'm late for another meeting, so I will stop the recording.